it's a big deal having it on that semi-trailer, and tonight at 3 o'clock, sort of following it down the mountain.
How long will the trip take you?
The documentary featured the sculpture. Wow, this was interesting and neat, and I loved watching it. So the length for me was just great. I really liked, to me, a good part of a documentary is getting invested in the people and interested in the people that are in this documentary, the documentary is about, and the people that you're following. Otherwise, why would you want to keep watching? So I really liked the backstory on the two main people, the sculptor and then the philanthropist, Basil, I think is his name, and his brother. It was really neat to see and hear about their stories. And I loved how the sculpture, the artist, started with stained glass windows. I love stained glass. It was just kind of neat. And I actually wanted to see kind of more about his sculpting and the different materials and how long does it take, and like for the little sculptures, and then how long does it take for a sculpture like that's 50 feet tall. So I wanted to see a documentary about him and his sculpting, actually. So please do that. It would be very, very interesting, and just giving us like information on all the different sculptures he's done and how long they took and what the materials are and how do you pick the materials. That would be really cool. Anyway, this itself was just really great. It was interesting to see that as of now, it's still not installed. That's amazing to me. Like, what the heck? They had this agreement and it went all over the place as far as what was supposed to happen, what didn't, what was supposed to happen next. And just interesting. Great use of the photographs as well throughout. I liked the different, the interviews, the photographs, watching him do his work. A lot of great, interesting things along the way. Great opening to explain the project and what the documentary is about. Interesting that the philanthropist had no really formal education, that he was self-made, and that he was giving this as a gift to Australia. Really cool, amazing story. I just am frustrated myself now that these poor guys, they went to all this effort and actually took off the bottom. I forgot what those things that they cut off were called. Was it the very bottom of the sculpture? And then they still haven't been able to install it yet because of all the different, reasons that it could be for not getting it out there. It makes sense though that not everybody is going to get their sculpture out there, right? Or it would be they wouldn't be special. There has to be a special meaning to it. And I thought this one had a great symbolic meaning. Yeah, just really, really awesome. I hope they find a home for it soon. I hope this documentary really helps them find a home for it. And I would love to see a follow-up once it's getting installed. It would be neat to watch that journey as well, like getting into its home. So great job to everyone involved.
All right, I just finished watching the sculpture, which I found to be pretty interesting. I thought it was covering a subject that I thought is generally pretty fascinating. You go out into a city, to a space, you see a large art installation or a structure or something that's here to commemorate someone, and you wonder what the process was like in putting that there, and you think it's just a simple process of creation, but it is really quite complicated, a tremendous amount of money. Normally, as in this case, there's a private philanthropist, there's a previous relationships, there are political dynamics in terms of what the sculpture looks like, how it's going to work, where it's going to be, and I thought that the entire piece had a very sort of educational and academic dynamic that was matched by sort of the general fascinating sequences built around what it means to actually make the sculpture. So I thought both on an intellectual level, when they covered the sort of the human aspect of it and the political and people aspect of it, worked well to counterbalance when you were just in the sort of creative, artistic dynamic of it, and sort of how you make art that works at that scale, that's supposed to work for so many different people that's supposed to exist for such a long period of time and work as a gift to an entire country, an entire culture, a way of life, and as well as highlighting the particular subject. So I thought that it really did sort of cover the multiple angles of which these type of projects are approached, and I felt like for a layman like me, you might not really have any idea how this really happens, and I thought this piece worked well in giving you sort of an insight as to how these people think about this kind of work and what their intentions are when they want to make a sculpture that has to be interacted with and impact so many people and represent so much. So I thought it was very well done and a good representation of the process overall.
I feel frustrated for the sculptor, Terrance, to go this long where the government's deciding on permits, not deciding on permits. This documentary really showed everything: the frustration of an artist, their patron, the funding, what happens when the funding gets stripped. It shows, it even delved into cancel culture. It has everything that artists are going through today in one documentary. I appreciate seeing it, this man's struggle just to get this up. The changing government definitely couldn't help, since it is a public sculpture. I appreciated seeing how iron sculptures are made. I knew how clay ones were made. I didn't know how iron ones work. But you could really feel their frustration through the screen with how many times this project has been stopped. But the patience that Terrance has is absolutely amazing as well. It's utter patience, which all artists need, but he just does it. I loved hearing that his influences were Gandhi and Beethoven. It's always nice to know where an artist is getting their inspiration from, and that he works from the heart, which is where most artists should work from. You could feel his frustration, even though he was trying not to let it get to him. That a project that was commissioned in 2015, I believe they said, maybe 2013, took so long to get going, and then it still stops over and over again. It's that they had to make sure structural integrity, so if people climbed on it, it wouldn't do anything. This documentary really did cover everything that goes into a sculpture, and most importantly covered both the patron and the artist and how they work together, and how it could be as completely frustrating as anything else.
I really like the sculpture. I really like the idea. You know, I always say the strength of a documentary rises and dies on the subject matter. And I really like the idea of telling the story of like how a sculpture like this gets made, like a public art installation gets made, like the whole journey of like from inception to completion and all the complications along the way. And then so I like that idea. And then I like even more the tie-ins of the history of Australia and how like the past affects the present, affects the future, and like the social commentary and all of that, like using the story of the statue as a vehicle to teach somebody like me who has never thought about the like social political history of Australia, using this story of the statue as a vehicle to teach me about that type of thing. I think that is a cool blending narrative technique that y'all use. So, and I think y'all did it well. And yeah, and I also like the little graphic of the little roller coaster loop of the, so that we can track how we like all of the like different attempts and all of this stuff. Things like that is like good storytelling when it comes to like documentary filmmaking, to help the audience follow along with what you're trying to say. So really well done. Good job.
The sculpture is a very interesting film about like the idea of public art. You know, and at the heart of the film, you have this patron-artist relationship, which I thought was really fascinating because those relationships have dominated artistic creation for centuries, but they don't really exist anymore. So that kind of weird little anachronism gives you some insight into the state of art of today, but also like what it could be. And I think this kind of ties into explorations of like philanthropy, because the film isn't just about the sculpture. It weaves into a variety of issues. One of them is like the impact of philanthropy on contemporary Australian society, and the relationship between like public works public art and artistic creation is really interesting, and the way that art itself becomes like a public service, which I think is really cool. And that's kind of like the whole point of the sculpture itself, is to be an active public service. So I think that was really cool. But then you also have the kind of dive into political issues regarding, you know, the place of like public art and sculpture and statues in our society and responses to that. But also you have all the bureaucratic nightmare of trying to get this thing displayed somewhere, which is crazy, you know. The amount of ministers went through, the years it took is ridiculous, and it kind of makes you almost question whether the values that the art is trying to celebrate actually exist within, you know, that society. If you know, if it's, I mean, it's not even displayed. The fact that it's not even displayed now is ridiculous. So it's interesting to see how they're making a work of art that valorizes a set of, you know, a way of kind of being that is kind of absent from the structures that are supposed to get this art out into the world. So I thought that was very frustrating, but interesting. And I think, you know, despite the cynicism that kind of engenders, I think the ambition of the project is kind of inspirational. I really hope it does get displayed soon.
The visuals for the sculpture. This was particularly interesting since we learned a lot about the life and work of Terrance Plowright and his partnership with Basil Sellers in their journey to a magnificent result that's to highlight Australia's 60,000 years history with a sculpture that was commissioned by this person that has a lot of philanthropic efforts in Australia, and then how they find a lot of controversy and several change of plans during this journey and some protest. And I loved how they touch on how public art can be touching for the people and how it represents the expression of the same people and their own history. And this is forever a reminder to newer generations and to other cultures as well. And I love how they used other quotes, but the one I loved was by Terrance that says he wants to go above and beyond culture, religion, and politics with this particular sculpture that, even though was a gift to the government of South Wales in Australia, it was very hard to find the final location for it to be showcased as it really deserved. And I learned a lot. These people have amazing hearts, and everyone seems to love them, and I really enjoyed learning about them. And this magnificent sculpture is just amazing.